He's trying to deputize him. The guy kept on denying it. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, "This is the same night as."
It's 6 o'clock, and I'm calling this meeting to order of the governing body, February 1st. If you would all give your attention to Councilman Lesser, who will be providing the invocation, and stand if you're able to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to introduce Mr. Barry Finker to please come forward and give us the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Lesser. Mayor, council members, city manager, and staff, thank you for the opportunity to come and pray with you tonight. Before I do that, I want to say that most of us may understand the date, but we don't remember the year. 157 years ago today, President Abraham Lincoln signed the proclamation for, not the proclamation, but the papers for the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery in the United States. The state of Kansas was very instrumental, and its leaders that came before you all to do what they had to do in very difficult times to help us to be where we are today. 4 years ago, this governing body also took on the task of declaring war against modern-day slavery called human trafficking with the state of Kansas. And so this body, people came before you and some that are here today, made hard decisions. And that's what you're here to do, is make hard decisions in the best unity that you can. And by that, we want to pray for you tonight. Father, we thank you for this beautiful day that you've given to us, the day before potential storm. And we thank you, Lord, for the men and women who are preparing, even tonight, to keep this city safe. We thank you for our citizens, and we thank you for the prosperity of this community of Topeka, Kansas, and the great numbers we've seen in reduction of certain numbers that concern us in poverty and crime. We thank you for a desire for people to want to relocate to Topeka, Kansas. We thank you for its leaders in this room tonight who make critical decisions every single day and every Tuesday to come together to be able to analyze how Topeka, Kansas can be the best it can be. As we prepare for the storm that's before us, we recognize that there are some people in our community that are in storms all the time. There are people that maybe don't have heat tonight, people that don't have a place to live, people that maybe are in great need. We thank you for those that come together to consider all of our citizens who are valuable and important, not just a few, but all. That's what happened 157 years ago today, and what has happened continually through this city, through this state, and through this nation. Much work yet to be done, Lord, but we thank you that we have people that are standing here tonight that are saying we want to stand in the gap for those to make all equal, to give all opportunity, to be able to humble ourselves before you and say thank you for loving us all. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Councilmembers Hiller.
Here.
Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Emerson. Hale.
Here.
Nager.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Leslie. He's here. We have 9 present.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is a mayoral proclamation. And we have visitors here, and I would ask them to join me up here by the microphone. Pastor Marcus Clark, Mr. John Nave, Miss Regina Platt, Miss Monique Glaudet, Miss Jackie Russell, Miss Monique Pittman, Michael Odepan, really can. I remind myself each time. Thank you for joining me. A proclamation by the mayor. Whereas the city of Topeka takes pride in recognizing February 2022 as Black History Month, celebrating the many achievements and contributions made by African Americans to our economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development. And whereas in 1976, as part of the nation's bicentennial, Black History Week was expanded to become established as Black History Month, and is now celebrated all over North America. And whereas the 2022 national theme for the observance is Black Health and Wellness, and whereas we celebrate Black health and wellness, including the legacy of Black scholars, midwives, nurses, doctors, and practitioners of not only Western medicine, but all the other indigenous ways of promoting health and healthy throughout the Black diaspora, and whereas we uplift our community leaders, Black business owners, professionals, and others who promote well-being and knowledge throughout the many facets of the Black community as part of our whole inclusive community, and whereas we engage all people to recognize and confront these issues by standing in the gap of every opportunity and eliminating barriers with fearlessness and determination to empower Black people to promote and protect their health and wellness and affirm the importance of Black health and wellness. And whereas the city of Topeka continues to work toward becoming an inclusive community in which all citizens, past, present, and the future, are respected and recognized for their contributions and potential contributions to our community, the state, the country, and the world. And now, therefore, I, Michael A. Padilla, Mayor of the City of Topeka, Kansas, do hereby proclaim February 1st through 28th, 2022 as Black History Month. And I call upon the citizens of Topeka, Kansas to observe this month in appropriate programs, activities, and reflections, and to continue our efforts to create a world that is more just, equitable, and prosperous for all. Thank you very much, and I would ask the people who are up here and joining me in this celebration if they would like to make any comments about Black History Month and the significance to the country.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to the council, thank you all so much for this wonderful presentation and proclamation. The songwriter said, God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far along the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever on the path, we pray. We're going to ask at this time if several of our guests would bring greetings.
Well, first I want to thank you, Mayor, the council, and the city government for this recognition. You know, we start the year off in celebrating Dr. King, then we go into February, celebrate Black History Month. We always want to continue to strive to bring that throughout the year of recognition of individuals and people of color in their achievements and their successes. We've got a long way to go, but we're getting there. But we continue to have that dialogue at the table and that frank discussion about relationships and building that. So I want to thank you on behalf of my organization, the Kansas AFL-CIO, and all of its members. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Monique Pittman. I want to thank the mayor for inviting me to be a part of this very auspicious group celebrating the beginning of Black History Month. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, a place where Black people are in power and a place where there is a very large Black upper and middle class. When I moved here to Topeka, it was very, very difficult. It is still difficult because people of color are not in power here. But who knows, maybe one day it will. But what I've always enjoyed, no matter where I am, is the ability to celebrate Black History Month. It's a time where I don't feel so invisible, and it's a time of opportunity for camaraderie and definitely for teaching. I just want to take exception to some of the words of Reverend Feaker. Yes, you know, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed today. And yes, you know, Kansas had a little bit to do with the Civil War and where Black people are today. However, do you know that even though slavery was not, even though Kansas was on the side of the Union, Black people were not allowed here. There was a law from the beginning, and then just later were we able to come. Also, there were orphanages here run by religious white people where after Native American children had been killed, they were put in these orphanages to strip them of their culture and to become more like white Americans and their culture. So Kansas also has a spotty history. That's one thing that I'm happy about, like I said, the ability for us to have Black History Month. If we do not teach the truth about American history, we are going to become more and more in trouble than we already are. I'm already frightened about where this nation is going. And I definitely hide my money, and my family has an escape plan. So when white supremacists and the people who support them and are in control of our government decide that they need to, one more time, keep going from the dress rehearsal from January 6th and completely take over this country. So I'm really excited to be able to still have the freedom to be able to be openly a Black person in the United States and not have to be too afraid about being murdered. I also just want to say that I am a proud member of the Topeka, Kansas chapter of the Links Incorporated, and we put on an annual Black History program. This year, I'm the chair of it, and it will be on February 26th. It is a virtual program that will concentrate on the historical trauma of Black women, looking at the intersectionality of both race and gender when it comes to the things that Black women have to deal with, how to mitigate them and still survive. Another thing that will happen during that program, every year we give out awards. We usually recognize 2 to 3 women in the area. And this year, we have the honor of giving our top award to Mrs. Leola Brown Montgomery, who is the widow of the case namesake for Brown v. Board of Education. She is 100 years old, and despite the fact that the National Historic Site refuses to have anything to do with the Brown family and the people whose history it is, we, Black women in Topeka, are not going to let the dominant culture tell us who our heroes are. Please join us on February 26th. You can register at www.topekalinksinc.com. Thank you.
Well, Mayor, I thank you. Councilmen and women, I thank you. And I thank you to everyone that shows up in this space wholeheartedly. A piece comes to mind. I'm just holding on. I'm just holding on. We are grateful that today you recognize the resilience of the African American community, not only nationwide, but here in the city of Topeka. There are women and men who are just holding on, who are in need of mental health services, who are in need of their health care needs being taken care of, who are in need of being valued and heard, because they must understand that it is their difference that makes the difference. So I thank you on today for pulling us all to the side and saying that you proclaim justice. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate each of you who have attended this evening to hear the governing body conduct the business of the community, because what we just heard is the business of this community. So it's important that we take these opportunities to recognize all aspects of our community. Thank you again. We will move on now to item number 3, appointments.
A is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Samuel Sutton to the Metropolitan Topeka Airport Authority Board for a 3-year term ending February 1, 2025.
Okay, we have heard the clerk. What is the pleasure of the body?
Move approval.
Have a motion and a second to approve in a second. Any discussion? Okay, you'll call the roll, please.
Council members Kell,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
and Ortiz.
Yes.
We have 8 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. And I believe Mr. Sutton is in attendance this evening. Mr. Sutton, would you stand, please, so we can recognize you and thank you for stepping forward to serve in this capacity. If the clerk would read the consent agenda.
A is an ordinance introduced by interim city manager William E. Cochran, allowing and approving city expenditures for the period of October 30 through November 26, 21, and enumerating said expenditures therein. B is an ordinance introduced by interim city manager William Cochran, allowing and approving city expenditures for the period of November 27, 21 through December 31, 2021, and enumerating said expenditures therein. C is approval of a utilities contract amendment to the existing professional engineering services agreement between the City of Topeka and Bartlett and West, Inc. for providing additional consultant work for the 2 million gallon West Zone elevated tank project. D are minutes of the regular meeting of January 11, 2022 and January 18, 2022, and there are no applications.
Thank you. You have heard the consent agenda. What is the pleasure of the body? Have a motion to approve?
Second.
And a second. Will you call the roll, please?
Council members Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
I'll abstain from this.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
and Ortiz,
Yes.
and Kell.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yes with Mr. Dobler abstaining. Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on now to item 5, action items. If the clerk would read, please.
A is an appeal to the governing body as specified under KSA 75-2724 for the issuance of a fence permit found by the Topeka Landmarks Commission to damage and destroy the historic integrity of the property located at 333 Southwest Greenwood Avenue and the surrounding Potwood Place National Historic District in the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, Council, this is an action item, reference a fence issue at this address. At this time, I will turn it over to Amanda Stanley, who, like I said, this is an action item, and she will outline your options for this particular issue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a governing body under law, it requires you to do certain things tonight. So you have three options. You can, one, make a finding that there are feasible and prudent alternatives that exist to the fence as currently constructed by the Adams. In that case, the governing body would make a motion that there are feasible and prudent alternatives to the existing fence that include replacing the fence with a decorative metal fence or removing the fence, and that these alternatives are sufficient to minimize harm to the property. The consequence of taking that action is that the Adams will be either forced to replace the fence or remove it. Your second option is to find that feasible and prudent alternatives do not exist, in which case you would make a motion that the governing body finds that based on the consideration of relevant factors, there are no feasible and prudent alternatives to the existing fence, and that all possible planning has been done to minimize the harm to the property. The consequence of that is that the fence would be approved as constructed, and developmental services would then issue a fence permit. Your third option is to defer for more information, and then you would defer it to a date certain. After the last hearing, the Adams provided information to the planning department regarding the alternatives that they suggested during their public comment period. Planning department has evaluated those and provided you a memo about whether or not there are feasible and prudent alternatives. They are here tonight and can discuss those findings with you before you move on to public comment period.
Thank you. As I understand it, we would entertain a motion from the governing body before we move to public comment.
Normally, you would do public comment first.
Okay. Then we will do that. We have, I think, on my list, I see 5 people signed up for public comment on this item. Bridget Markey, here in person. Would you step forward, please?
Can I make a quick comment for public comment? Mr. Mayor, I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation in a vote. I actually didn't know who owned this home until I saw them last week, and I actually have a contract with their business, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to be part of this decision at the end of the day. So when I stay quiet and don't vote, now you know why. So just wanted to let everyone know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for being here. Go ahead.
Thank you for listening. Good evening, governing body. I presented reasonable alternatives last time you allowed me to discuss this. And instead of going back over those points again, I believe they've been covered. I wish only to address one point tonight. Recently, I received an email from Helen Crow informing me of her concerns about precedent. I believe Helen raises a prudent concern for the future. Although she acknowledges letting this fence stand will not remove the historic district status, nor will it threaten the Potwin citizens' tax eligibilities, she believes the fence poses a threat to the rules. And that, I think, is really what bothers her the most about this matter, as with the rest of those who have planned and gathered the historic status for Potwin. They do not want to lose what they have so rightfully earned. If the fence is permitted, then where do the deviations end? It is a reasonable question. No bad precedent need be set by allowing the Adams fence to remain. As was admitted during the last discussion of this fence, Potwin has arguably no system of notice in place. Rather than treat the Adams fence as a threat to the rules, I would propose that this is an opportunity for Potwin to strengthen reinforcement of the rules. Nothing is stopping Potwin from creating a notice system that would prevent mistaken or intentional deviations, such as the Adams fence in the future. This can be a system that requires all members of Potwin to sign written acknowledgments of the rules and create a commitment to follow them. The Adams fence can be treated as a reasonable accommodation that was permitted prior to this system being set in place. In other words, there would be no excuses and no kind of reasoning to get out of it. There is a paper trail that Potwin can present. I am not here to tell Potwin how they ought to craft this notice system. However, I am here to provide reasonable solutions that respect the needs of the Adams while assuaging the understandable concerns of Potwin. I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. We have Mr. Vernon Jarbo. Is he here to present?
Mr. Mayor, I'm here on behalf of the applicant or the appellant, I guess. May I appear last after all the others have spoken?
I want to just check and make sure that we didn't require advance notice or representation to appear in his behalf.
Generally, we go in order, but you could choose to make that discretionary choice.
Sir, you could go ahead and approach the body. Thank you. When you get to a point where we can hear you on that microphone, if you would restate your name, please.
Vernon Jarbo.
Okay.
I'm here on behalf of the Adams.
Okay.
And I think the reason I have to go last is it's difficult to address concerns I don't know that exist. And so I was treating this kind of like a zoning case, and I have traditionally gone last on behalf of my client in that setting so that I could respond to things that have been raised. This is not a zoning case. I recognize that. I think what's important here is when we talk about the rules, feasible and prudent, that's what you're here about. And in this case, feasible and prudent means tear down something that's been built. Now, admittedly, it happened without a permit. On the other hand, my client hired a recognized fencing company in this community and paid them. And they proceeded to make the application for the permit, which is exactly what she understood they would do. They just didn't wait for it to be issued, which she didn't know. And as has been pointed out by my associate, Bridget, it's important to understand that in this case, we're really asking for an accommodation for a veteran who's suffering from extensive trauma and PTSD. The solution was to put up a fence to contain the dogs that are the creatures that let him live independently. So, from that perspective, this is important in the sense that it lets us make an accommodation by virtue of this particular situation without creating precedent, as Bridget talked about. There's other fences very similar to this fence already in the neighborhood. So this isn't like the proverbial, camel's nose in the tent. The head of the camel's already in the tent. So I recognize that Potwin has concerns. They have their historic district created, but admittedly, they haven't done a good job of letting new owners know. So a reasonable system to let new owners have advance notice as they move in would be very appropriate. But from my perspective, that's their problem. And from a real estate attorney's perspective, which is where I come from, advance notice to current owners would put them in a spot if they didn't tell somebody that they sell to, which in this case, the Adams were not told that there was any special requirement. So I think the fact that we're here gives us the opportunity to try to correct something that's been going on poorly, and gives us the opportunity to let this veteran live with the dogs that he needs to live with without creating an undue burden on this neighborhood. I appreciate your attention. If you have questions, I'll address them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, I have Lindsay Adams listed.
Thank you all so much for your time again, and the time that I know that you've spent considering this situation. I did want to mention that something I should have thought of before was we would be more than willing to sign an agreement with the city that when we sell this home, we take the fence down or take every other picket off when we are to leave. So it really would just be a fence for us. I don't know if that matters to anyone, but that is something that I would be more than willing to do. And to everyone else, this is just it's a fence, or it's a district, or it's a violation, or it's a rule. But to me and my husband, it's our home and it's our life. And, you know, to be with somebody that suffers with paranoia that has developed from since before you knew them is a very surreal experience. And I know it seems trivial that a 4-foot fence matters, but it does. And that's just my reality. This really wasn't a slap in the face to anyone or a purposeful violation in any manner. And I'm really sorry that this has even happened, more than you know. More than you know. So I do appreciate your consideration, and I do ask that you let us keep our fence, and we would be more than willing to take it with us when we leave. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We have listed Marie Hall via Zoom. You have her, Gretchen? Ms. Hall?
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your time this evening and for all of the time you have spent discussing this subject. My name is Marie Hall, and I own a home in the Potwin Place neighborhood. I had not originally planned on speaking tonight, but I'm doing so at the urging of many, many neighbors who share similar concerns, but unfortunately were not able to attend today's meeting. After watching the last City Council meeting and several comments made tonight, a question that seems to be raised repeatedly is, how do people learn of Potwin's historic district status prior to making a purchase? My husband and I just bought our home in Potwin 2 years ago, so I'd like to share our experience as someone who recently moved to a historic district. It is common for Potwin real estate listings and disclosure paperwork to mention the historic district status. In fact, and I even checked this today, you can still look up the last real estate listing for 333 Greenwood online on sites like Zillow, and included in the listing description, it was the third sentence, is the statement, Potwin is on the National Register of Historic Places. I know when I came across similar language when I was purchasing my home, I was curious what exactly it meant to live in a registered historic district. I Googled Potwin Place and immediately found information on the City of Topeka's website that included the boundary map and district nomination form, as well as resources on the Kansas Historical Society's webpage. It didn't take me long to learn that exterior renovations that required a permit would need to be historically appropriate. Though I won't claim to be an expert on historic preservation, I can say that I would never want to modify my home in a way that would damage the integrity of the historic district, and that I appreciate that the Landmarks Commission exists to provide guidance. The neighborhood and unique feel to Potwin Place was the primary reason we made our purchase, even more so than the specific home that we bought. I viewed the National Historic District status as a benefit when we made our purchase, as it gave me confidence that the characteristics that drew us to the neighborhood would be preserved. Unfortunately, this appeals process has made me feel that my confidence in that historic district status may have been misplaced. If this appeal is approved, it seems to set a precedence that homeowners can do whatever they want with no regard for the Landmarks Commission's expertise. There are many homes in this neighborhood with small animals that have all found reasonable ways to contain them while complying with historical standards. It may just seem like one fence at one property, but should this trend continue across other properties, over time we will lose that magical feel that makes Potwin so special and is the reason I bought a home here. This is adversely affecting many homeowners like myself who made their purchase with the expectation that that historic district status would protect their property and the feel of the neighborhood as a whole. This also impacts everyone in Topeka that enjoys visiting the Potwin Place neighborhood. It's no secret that we get thousands of trick-or-treaters at Halloween and a line of traffic viewing our circle decorations for the entire month of December. We receive visitors year-round who want to step back in time for a moment to enjoy the feel of these historic homes. Maintaining the historic district standards is part of that magic. In addition to that, this issue isn't really exclusive to historic districts. As you all know, fence permits are a City of Topeka requirement. Regardless of how it happened, this fence was constructed without an approved permit. One council member stated at the last meeting that many residents in her district have been required to remove things that were constructed without a permit. I have to ask, what message does it send to those residents if this appeal is approved? Does everyone get exceptions going forward if they beg for forgiveness after something is constructed? Or are these issues given more weight if they come?
Okay. She's done. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Next we have signed up is Mr. Dan Crow.
Hi. Yes, Mr. Mayor, distinguished members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. My name is Dan Crow, and I am here to ask you to uphold the decisions made by both the Landmarks Commission and the City Planning Department. By way of perspective, my wife Helen and I live at 400 Southwest Greenwood. That is catty corner, directly catty corner from 333 Southwest Greenwood. From our kitchen windows, we have a full view and a side view of the house and the fence in controversy. So therefore, my interest in this issue is real. It's not merely hypothetical. I look at this fence every day. For additional perspective, I am a private practice lawyer here in Topeka. A large part of my practice focuses on real estate law, and beyond that, I am a licensed real estate broker and have been since 1980. I tell you this to show that I have both a personal and a professional interest in this issue. For the record, I take no joy in appearing here today. This is not fun. I have no personal agenda against Lindsay. Just the contrary. She's a Potwinite. As Potwin people, we stick together and we take neighboring very seriously. My purpose here today is simple. I merely ask you to uphold the rulings of the Landmark Commission and the City Planning Department and declare that the fence is a violation and should be removed or modified. Please let me tell you why. The Landmark Commission exists in part to protect the integrity of the National Historic Districts, like Potwin Place, all around the country. The members take their jobs seriously, and they make decisions based on facts. The fact is, this fence is non-compliant. To my knowledge, there are no real factual disputes about that at all. It is a violation, and it should not be allowed. To allow a violation undermines the purpose and the intent of the federal law of National Historic Districts all across the country. Further, to chip away at his enforcement powers is to challenge the essence of the law itself, thereby creating dangerous precedent. Second, and with all due respect to Lindsay's circumstances and her husband's circumstances, Lindsay was advised that a fence permit would be required. For whatever reasons, and regardless of whose fault it was, a fence permit was not obtained. Since it's clear that the fence is a violation, no fence permit should be retroactively issued by this body, which would endorse the construction of an illegal fence. As I understand it, that is exactly what you're being asked to do, is to endorse the unlawful construction of a non-compliant fence. Lastly, and I guess simply stated, the law is the law. A fence is a clear violation of the law, and a non-compliant fence was installed without a permit. Two bodies have already ruled it's a violation. And remember, the courthouse doors are open to those who feel damaged by the actions of others. Any such remedy should be sought there and not here. Please let me leave you with one final perspective by providing you with a simple analogy. If I drive 50 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, I have broken the law. Now, to say that I didn't know the speed limit is not an excuse. I have broken the law, period. And I cannot reasonably expect you or any other governing body to change the law just because I broke it. I ask you to please enforce the lawful and the well-reasoned decisions made by the Landmarks Commission and the City Planning Department. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we've heard public comment on this item. What is the pleasure of the body? Mr. Kell.
I truly believe we need to defer.
If we want to get into that, I think we'd have to have a motion and a second to get into discussion. Am I correct?
Were you planning to
Mr.
make a
City
motion?
Attorney, madam?
Generally, you have a motion and a second, and then you discuss.
Okay.
So do I have a,
Motion to upheld upheld the ruling of the Landmark Commission.
okay.
Okay. Excuse me.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Councilwoman Nager.
I think he wanted to make a motion to defer.
Well, yeah, I'm saying, but we have three options and we haven't discussed, we're going on to an option where without the discussion, people are making a decision on one of those three without a discussion. I believe we need to discuss these options before we move on to making a motion on one of those three options. Because now you're forcing a vote on a situation without even discussing the three options we have in front of us.
It is my understanding that with the motion and the second, we go into discussion. And during that discussion, if the motion and second does not prevail, then someone else can make another motion to one of the other options.
Okay.
Am I correct?
Correct. You can also make a substitute motion at any time.
Okay, thank you.
So now we're in discussion.
Okay.
So Mr. Kell.
My main thing is we were not given all the information by the last week when it was discussed. I've talked to both sides, they've reached out to me, and all the options were not laid out in front of us. So how can we make a ruling on something when we weren't even given factual information by the people that spoke in front of us that were, I believe it was Mr. Warner or someone, I can't remember the exact name, but the picket fence idea wasn't even an option. He presented us with three metal fencing options, and speaking to both sides of this issue that have reached out to me, there's other options on the table, but we were just given limited information. Both sides have been talking to each other, and things aren't going where they want them to go, but we are seeing some things. So I believe we should defer this and have all the options put out there. Let it be known, because if we're making decisions off of partial information, we're not helping anyone. And I believe we need to move forward with some other possible ordinances to prevent this in the future.
Thank you. Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it has been stated by several people, there are two bodies that exist that have already ruled on this, the Landmark Commission and the City Planning Department. To go against the City Planning Department, that's going against our own staff. And to go against the Landmark Commission is to completely neuter them of their power. And these groups of people have both done their research. They have all come to their conclusions, and for us to fly in the face of that is to fly in the face of precedent and create an inconsistent ruling system. And that's not fair to the citizens of Topeka. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. I think last week when we had talked about this, was it last week? Yeah, last week. Was it the week before?
Correct.
So I had some concerns about, and no one was able to answer it, how long it took for the fence to come up, obviously, because the person in public comment couldn't discuss that with us. So I'm still not sure about that. It sounded to me like the neighbors were watching it go up. And I understand the hallowed ground that Landmarks Commission, stands on, and I think that that should be taken very seriously. The rub for me is definitely that it won't take them out of their historic status. It won't keep them from getting the whatever incentives that they get. But more than that, and I'm going to be redundant, but deal with the redundancy, is having worked so long for the Veterans Administration and seeing families that are dealing with and living with one or both parties with PTSD, and hearing people comment what this is doing to our neighborhood. They should have followed the rules. All I had to do was look this up, and so on and so forth. The work that I would do with veterans, you see in their lives, it's never that easy when you were talking about PTSD. And so I think, to me, I would not be able to support this because I am looking at it from a reasonable accommodation, and hearing that one of the first women that spoke said that there is similar type fences. I also believe the Potwin needs to get their wording and their verbiage together. But it's just the thing that this can be considered, to me, from what I know about reasonable accommodations, a reasonable accommodation. We have a veteran that is suffering from PTSD, and none of us know what that is like. And the extra stress that we're putting on this family, I just think, to me, this is a right or wrong. It has additional elements in it that you normally would not see. And because of that reasonable accommodation that can be given, this is something that I can't support the ruling. And that's really not usually how I come from, but this just feels wrong to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I represent this district, and colleague Kell, we actually started working on this in November, and I do think if you went through the correspondence and the testimony from November and the documents from the Landmarks Commission and the planning staff, then supplemented by what we got 2 weeks ago when we heard this again, or 3 weeks, whenever it was in January, we've had a pretty thorough accounting that has then been supported by corresponding accounts from I quit counting, but probably more testimony from neighbors in the area, as well as pretty darn thorough landmarks and planning reports. So as I've listened, because I also represent this district, so I had some communication directly, but I don't think I got anything that everybody else didn't get as well. Just to say, I feel like we have to support the recommendation of the Landmarks Commission, and I want to make a couple references to the new suggestions that were given today, and then kind of go through my rationale on it. One, the new ideas today, I appreciate the idea of advance notice, but I think we've taken care of the fact that that all the standard notice was there in terms of being in the real estate ad and the listing. Maybe it should change, but it shouldn't be the responsibility of the neighbors to tell either. If the fence stays up, it gives the wrong message. The way people figure out what's okay in a neighborhood and what's not is to look around. And there have already been discussions that the fences that were similar to that are not actually in the district, and many, many examples provided to us of fences that are appropriate in the district, as well as testimony from the staff of the ideas that they gave directly as this went through our landmarks and planning process. Lots of ideas were offered, and nothing worked. but it's not okay to leave it up and give the wrong message about what those standards are. It just kind of unplugs the whole standards for the district. Again, we've had many, many calls and letters from residents of the district, and there hasn't been a single one that they refuted it, said, please respect our district, and also pointed out that early on, when it was on the listserv, neighbors actually advised the owners directly, at least Ms. Adams, of alternatives and talked to her directly. So what we know from the facts of the case then is that apparently they didn't look at the listings that described it was in a district, didn't check the references on what that meant. I think I recall testimony that the realtor didn't provide that information or perhaps told him it was all right. They had a relationship with a contractor, had the owners or the contractor filed for the permit properly, they would have been advised. It's not the city's fault that didn't happen, that the procedures didn't go step by step so that alert would have been given in a timely manner about that fence. Again, the neighbors warned and offered help. So I do support the motion to sustain the Planning Commission's position that there are reasonable alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Dobler, and then Councilman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a point of clarification, I guess, from the city attorney. So we have two options listed. Obviously, deferring is a third option, but the two options that you have listed, the motion on the floor right now is option number one. Is that correct?
Correct.
What happens if that fails?
If that fails, then for clarity, you should make a motion that the feasible and prudent alternatives do not exist. If you do nothing, it's implied that you find that there are alternatives if you vote that there are not. Sorry.
I don't think I'm following that. So we
I
have.
didn't follow myself. I apologize. So if the motion fails, that you find that there are feasible and prudent alternatives, tends to imply that means that you are finding that there are not feasible and prudent alternatives, and the fence would just stand if you did nothing else.
So that puts us in a little bit of a pickle here. We have 8 possible votes. It takes 6 to pass the motion that's on the floor. So that means with 3 votes, essentially the other option would prevail. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mayor, I'd make a substitute motion that there are no feasible and prudent alternatives to the fence, and all possible planning has been done to minimize harm to the property.
Can we get, sorry, I think myself and the councilwoman want clarification on that, please.
Just give me I'm running this meeting, okay? If we could make clear that the substitute motion is acceptable, and then have a second to that, and then move forward with whether or not it would replace.
Substitute motions are in order at this time, and my understanding is the councilman just made a substitute motion to find that feasible and prudent alternatives do not exist. If you voted yes on that, you would need 6 votes to pass that motion. If there are 6 votes that feasible and prudent alternatives do not exist, then the Adams can keep their fence. If that motion fails, then you're still at the point where you would need to decide whether or not you're deferring or approving the fence to be taken down. Sorry.
Councilman Dobler.
Now, you just said the opposite of what you said the last time.
I think if you are going to find that the Adams have to take down their fence, you need an affirmative vote of that because they need something to appeal. You need a final action.
Okay, so that's the difference in the two.
They need a final action. They have the right to appeal to district court if you're going to require them to take down a fence.
I understand. So, yeah, I'll leave my motion on the table.
Okay. Do we have a second to his motion?
I think I'm so confused on what it's.
We're voting on the substitute motion offered by Councilman Dobler.
Well, I think myself and the councilwoman next to me were confused on exactly what that motion is 100% meaning, because I honestly, I think we're all just kind of almost, with these motions, are talking around ourselves a little bit on this.
Councilman Catholic, thank you, but Councilman Valdivia Alcala, I recognize you. Please ask the chair to be recognized.
Okay. I heard what you said. I heard what she said. Now we need 6 votes on this substitute motion. If there is 6 votes, that would mean the fence stands. If there is not 6 votes, then we're back to, y'all are back to square one. Correct? Correct. Okay. Second? Can I make a second?
Pardon? Yes, please.
Somebody make a second already?
I haven't got a second, no, on the substitute.
Okay. Can I second that?
You can.
Okay. I'll second. Look, it's only been 2 years, okay?
We have a motion.
This is the trickiest we had.
A motion and a second, and we'll continue with discussion. Councilman Kell.
I apologize earlier about stepping out of bounds on that, and I apologize. I just want to kind of address what kind of was brought up after I spoke last time. If we're supposed to trust the planning commission, they didn't give us all our information. If they brought up 3 metal fences. There's a wooden picket fence as an option, and this even came from the side that wants the fence down, that a wooden picket fence of some variation is an option. But when the city planning commission only comes with us with 3 metal fence options, to me, I shouldn't trust information that's not accurate. Then also it was brought up about the listing. Well, Zillow's not a legal document. The seller, the contracts they're signing are the legal documents that homeowners have to attest to. As was spoken earlier, that Zillow is, on the listing. That's no legal document that we have to follow. So I think we need to, like I said before, put some things in place that keep this from happening in the future by having like realtors be a part of the packet, which I understand that both sides, or at least the side that wants to spend down, wants that as an option from the city to require realtors to have that, and also require contractors to see a permit before they start a job. And I think those are things that if we go on to, that's the reason I'm going for deferment. I want both sides to try to sit there and figure this out, because all the options aren't what all of the options are, what were presented to us that last meeting. So there are more options out there.
Thank you. Councilman Dobler.
If the picket fence is agreeable and meets the fencing guidelines, then it would be a feasible alternative. Correct?
I believe so, but that's the reason I want deferment, so they can go back and they can discuss both sides and try to, in this planning commission, the historic, so at least that landmarks commission, so at least they're both all on the same page. So we're not doing this again in 3 months because the picket fence that they choose to do doesn't fall within. That's what I'm saying. If we kick it back to them, everything's discussed between them, and then it's either dropped at their end or it comes back to us. But right now, I just feel like we weren't given the full information by the people that we were told that we need to trust to actually make a decision on this. So that's the reason I would prefer to kick it back to the planning commission and the landmarks.
Further discussion or clarification? I think restating the substitute motion and what will be the result of approving or denying the appeal. I want every council person here to understand what they're voting for.
Would you like me to do that, Mr. Mayor? Councilman
Please.
Dobler? Okay. So I understand it, Councilman Dobler's substitute motion is to make a finding that feasible and prudent alternatives do not exist. If 6 votes vote for that, then the Adams would keep their fence.
They will keep their fence, and will they have to work with the Historical Society to find that option, or
No,
it just stands as is?
This matter is concluded.
Okay. Okay. Further discussion? Anyone online? Okay, we'll call for the vote.
Councilmembers Dobler,
No.
Duncan.
He's abstained.
Lesser,
No.
Mayor Padilla,
No.
Councilmembers Hiller,
No.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
She's frozen, I think.
come back to her. Councilmember Kell,
No.
Councilmember Nager,
No.
and then Councilmember Ortiz.
No.
Okay, so we have,
He's sick.
we
Absent.
have 7 no, the motion fails. Valdivia Aquila voting yes, and Duncan abstained.
Councilman Kell.
I move that we defer this to a later date, no more than, let's say, bring it back up at the March 1st meeting, which gives us in essence 4 weeks, 4 solid weeks, and we can proceed past that.
We have a motion on the floor. I'm not sure it's in order at this point. If you could give me a ruling.
Yes, it's in order. You're back to ground zero.
Mhm. Okay. Councilman Lesser?
Do we have a second?
Okay. Okay. Do we have a second for Councilman Kell's motion to defer? Seeing no second, we'll move on. Councilman Lesser? Okay, we have your motion, and we had a second for that motion.
Yes,
So
second.
we will move forward with the vote, roll call vote.
Okay, so Councilmember Duncan is not present. Okay, so Councilmember Lesser.
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
No.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Kell,
No.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler.
Yes.
All right, so we have 6 yes, Valdivia, Aquila, and Kell voting no, so the motion carries.
Thank you for the discussion. Motion carries. We will move on to the next item, item 5B, if the clerk would read.
B is an ordinance introduced by interim city manager William Cochran concerning zoning and design standards for the downtown, amending Topeka Municipal Code sections 18-200, 010, 020, and 090, 18-225, 010, 18-60, 010, and 020, and repealing original sections.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, governing body, this is a action item to discuss the zone, rezone and update the zoning for downtown. At this time, I'll call Director Fylander forward to discuss that.
Thank you. Good evening. We made a presentation last week on, this is kind of a two-step process for phase one to implement the downtown master plan. The first phase includes the rezoning of proposed rezoning of about 91 properties to D1. That's the second step after this. What's before you right now is actually some text amendments to the zoning code that will help align our text of our D districts with mixed use compatibility for all of our D districts. So we would ask that you make motion on this particular step first before entertaining any rezonings. And I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Finder? Okay. All right. Thank you, Bill. So we've heard the information presentation. What is the pleasure of the body?
Move for approval.
Have a motion to approve and a second from Councilwoman Hiller. If you'll call the vote, please.
Discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. For discussion, I'm sorry, misspoke. For discussion on this particular item. Okay. Thank you. Seeing none, we'll call for the vote.
Council members Lesser? Yes. Mayor Padilla?
Yes.
Council members Hiller?
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila?
Yes.
Ortiz?
Yes.
Kale?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
And Duncan?
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
Motion carries. We'll proceed to item 5. I'm sorry, sir. Councilman Nasser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I do have a question for legal in regards to the agenda at this time, if it would be appropriate for me to ask that question.
Please.
Amanda, when would be a time, as we're in action items right now, if I wanted to make a motion to move an item from the discussion agenda up to an action item?
When we hit that discussion point, under the new governing body rules, when you would make a motion to suspend the rules to allow it to be voted on immediately, and then you would just vote on it during the discussion period, would be the easiest way to do that.
Okay. Do I need to tell you at this time what item that is for when it comes up, or do I need to wait till that point in time?
You can wait and tell me then.
Roger that.
Okay. Moving on to item 5C.
Ordinance C is an ordinance introduced by interim city manager William Cochran, amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by section 1850050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on properties located in downtown Topeka from M2 multiple family, M3 multiple family, and C2 commercial, C4 commercial, and O and I2 office and institutional, and I1 light industrial to D1 downtown district.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, government body, once again, at this time, I'll call Director Fylander forward to present this.
Thank you once again. You had heard a presentation 2 weeks ago on the properties proposed to be rezoned. This is, again, first phase of 3 phases for rezoning for our downtown D districts. I'll stand for any questions at this time if you have any.
Councilman Kell.
I believe you stated before, and I just want to clarify, this will not affect any homes or businesses, correct, that are currently downtown?
It will, there are 91 properties involved, so it will be rezoning properties that are currently zoned, various zoning districts, M, R, actually M, O and I, C, and I. So there are various zoning districts that it will, and various properties it will affect. Of the 91, all will be conforming, except for 5, and those 5 will be grandfathered in.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment about this one as well as the earlier one, actually. Once again, this is my district, and that's been a lot of work. I appreciate the fact that, as far as I know, everybody who had some concerns did reach out, and the responses were both with the changes in the zoning ordinance that we just did, as well as working with people on these classifications were appreciated, and things got worked out. And I just want to thank you for all of that process. You know that I still think it's kind of a mind bender to have separated D1, D2, and D3 and only look at one at a time, but they've now provided us maps that show a little more of the composite so we can get some context for it. Again, It's massive. I still think the plan is one of the best I've ever seen, and the process, and so thanks for the steps to move it forward.
Thank you.
And with that, let's see, I already seconded it, didn't I?
We haven't had a motion yet.
Oh.
No.
Move to approve.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Move forward with the roll call vote, please.
I believe we need to require ex parte, don't we, for the zoning matter? Ex parte? We needed to.
No, actually, this is a code amendment, so we do not need to require ex parte.
For the D1 rezone?
I'm both of them, sorry. We looked into
okay.
this beforehand. You don't have to disclose it. Feel free to if you want to, but you don't have to.
Okay. All right. Mayor Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller?
Yes.
Valdivia Acala?
Yes.
Ortiz?
Yes.
Kell?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
And Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
Thank you, Bill. Motion carries, and we'll move on now to item 5D, if the clerk would read.
D is ordinance introduced by Councilmember Neil Dobler concerning compulsory retirement, amending chapters 2.30 and 2.35 of the Topeka Municipal Code.
Thank you. Councilman Dober.
Thank you, Mayor. We've had quite a bit of discussion on this, so I'm not going to drag it out. Just point out again that this isn't something new. It was in the city code before the code was rewritten, and it was accidentally left out. This simply puts it back in. Again, seems pretty straightforward to me. We have support from both police and fire unions. We have support from both police and fire administration, and we have support from the city administration. With that, I would make the motion to approve.
Motion and a second to approve. A second is Councilman Lesser. Okay. All right. Under any further discussion, Councilman Duncan.
I had a question and a comment, Mayor. My question is to staff. I am curious, how long has this been off the books? 2 or 3 years? I mean, is that kind of... I want to ask, is there going to be anybody immediately impacted by this change? And have we factored that in at all? I mean, do they get some kind of grace period or, and I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I've not talked to anybody who's told me one way or the other.
The ordinance has a grace period written into it,
Okay.
and we timed that with KP&F quarters to make sure that it worked out.
Okay, perfect. All right. I have struggled with this one. As my previous, I was the one who asked for the delay. As you know, a few of us, he's not here tonight, council members, myself, had some questions and just some general concerns about this because we feel like at some point leave some people out. If good employees, we might be able to retain at certain levels. I've talked to both chiefs. I've talked to officers I know and firefighters I know. I've had several conversations with the unions, which have been very productive. I'm going to slightly lean yes on this evening, and here's why. Because in my discussions with the unions, they've made no promises, let me be clear, right? So this is trust between them and me and what happens over some time. But I think they understand my concerns, I understand theirs, and we've at least had some open dialogue that they're willing to have some continued conversations to bring something back, maybe in a year or so, that targets some of the positions specifically that we'd like to look at, or some sort of arrangement that addresses some of our concerns. Whether we get there or not, I don't know, but I'm optimistic that they're willing to at least continue those talks with me as we move forward. I won't speak for them. I understand they've made no promises, and I want to make that public, except to talk. And so I believe them. I trust that dialogue. It's been very productive from my perspective, and so they've tipped me ever so slightly to yes this evening, and so that's how I'll be voting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further comment? Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I too have given it a lot of thought. I've not gone and dived into the personnel meetings and so on. We've had 100% conflicting written testimony from within the firefighters corps. And I'm not going to be able to support it again. And let me explain my reasons. First, though, I mean, I appreciate every one of our firefighters and the lives that you've committed your lives to protect. So this is not at all, my comments are not at all about the caliber and the commitment that our firefighters have. I think it's been pointed out that this has been on the books for a long, long time. Times have changed. It's been on the books, I suspect, since they didn't hire women either, because there was an assumption that women probably weren't as strong as men, so the solution was just not to hire them. We've changed that along the way. One of the testimonies that we all got was about how fitness and so on has changed. I believe that this, we've had testimony too about the fact that we have people that we're desperately in need of firefighters, and that we're seeing more mid-career transfers in, people that are not coming straight out of high school or straight out of fire school. I think that this age cap discourages those transfers when we need the excellent people so much. Also, that cap at age 60, we've gone back and forth quite a bit about performance-based reviews and placements in the department. That age cap gets in the way of advancing our work on that. We've discussed before that this is arguably age discrimination. And just because there is a law that allows it, it doesn't mean that it's not an arbitrary age discrimination in terms of people who want to work and are capable of working. It's been pointed out that there is an annual fit for service that should take care of people's abilities to work, at least in active frontline firefighter positions, if those assessments need to be made. And for most firefighters, if they start young, in their 20s, they can retire with full benefits in their mid-50s if they choose. So, and we've seen in the police department that even with the age increase, the cap to 67, that our officers are retiring at around the age of 60 anyway. I don't think it's needed, and so I can't support it. But I do appreciate all the thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Kell.
This is something, wherever it was brought up, who does this affect? This affects the current staff members. Because if we're shoving people out the door when we don't have people coming in, that means those people have to work more, we get burnout, we lose more staff members. And just like Councilwoman Hiller brought up, just because something was code before doesn't mean it's right to be code now. And I've been to 4 station houses, talked multiple shifts, and and they brought it up to me that I haven't had one firefighter come to me and sit there and say that they're for the limit, and they're, there's even been discussion by 2 firefighters that there will be lawsuits for age discrimination if this is passed again, and they are forced to retire. So we need to look at how this is going to affect us long term, because like I said before, why are we shoving people out the door when we don't have that same number coming in the door? Maybe this is something we can look at later on when we do get more to full staffing, and look at a fitness test that will be equivalent to make sure that they're doing the job safely. But if we're just going to kick people out the door, we're going to end up burning out people also, and we're going to just lose good men and women that don't want to do the job anymore because they're doing it too often.
Further comments on this issue? Okay. We've had some discussion, motion and a second. No further discussion. I'll call for the roll call vote.
Okay, Council Members Hiller,
No.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Kell,
No.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla.
I don't believe I vote on this one.
He does not vote on this one.
Thank you. So we have 6 yes, motion carries. Council Members Hiller and Kell voting no.
Thank you. Motion carried. No further action items on the agenda, and we'll move to the non-action items, number 6 on the agenda, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion regarding the demolition of the structure located at 911 North Kansas Avenue.
Okay, we've had the reading of this non-action item. We can start, I think, with City Manager, if you had anything to offer to the council.
Mayor and council, this is a property in the Noto district that has had a demo order on it for some time. At this time, I'd like to call Property Maintenance Director Mike Haugen up to provide some additional information for you. This is currently a discussion item on the agenda right now.
Thank you. Mr. Haugen. Councilman Lesser, before you testify, Mike.
Mr. Mayor, this is the item that I had discussed, asked the question about, and I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules to move this up to an action item to allow the city manager to put it out for RFP and fund it out of the reserve rather than depleting the demolition budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If we could restate for the motion, City Attorney.
This is a motion under 6.3H of the rules to suspend Rule 5.3, which requires that no discussion item may be voted on at that meeting without a suspension of the rules. 7 votes are required to suspend the rules and consider this tonight for action.
Okay. Any questions about the motion? Councilwoman Hiller.
Well, I'm always uncomfortable with moving something. I mean, we've had some information about it, but is there a reason why this needs to be done tonight instead of next week with notice?
Councilman, it's up to you. Councilwoman Valdivia-Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike and I had talked about this, and since this is my district, I told Mike I'm fine with it for him to move forward on it. I think that this has been belabored. This has been out there for what feels like 100 years. The people, the businesses of Noto have spoken consistently and continuously about this issue and the lack of safety, especially for those that live in the district. So while it may be a bit uncommon, I'm comfortable with it. I know the residents and tenants of Noto would be comfortable. And just one more thing to help make that part of North Topeka feel safer. So I support Mike and what he's doing with this. It being my district.
Thank you. Councilman Lesser.
I'll respond now. First off, I want to apologize to Councilwoman Valdivia. This is in her district, and I did not notice. I was under the assumption that this was an action item, and I was behind. Doesn't really matter. I missed it, and so my apologies to her. I don't want to step on her territory, and if someone did that to me, then I would have some concerns as well. So my apologies for that. To answer your question, Councilman Hiller, I don't see what there is anything to really to postpone it for another week. I mean, I think this dog's been kicked enough, and I think part of this is also showing that we're done screwing around with this, whether it's White Lakes, whether it's this property, whether it's whatever it is. We're going to move, and we're going to move as quickly and as aggressively as possible, and give Mike and his team the tools to do that. And I don't need to talk about it another week. If the council and you feel that that's the case, then clearly you guys can vote, and we can take it another week. But that's clearly the reason is I don't see anything changing within the next week, other than maybe another big snowstorm and we don't get to come. So that's about it.
Any further comment? If I may, I'd like to follow up a little bit with what Councilman Lesser said and Councilwoman Valdivia-Alcala. I think this item has been before us long enough. I think the maybe moving it to an action item is prudent, not to carry on the conversation where we'll know where we end up, I think, again in another week or two. So I would encourage the body to vote in support of Councilman Lesser's motion to suspend the rules so that we can move this to an action item. If there are no further comments, Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I will vote against it just because it's only a week and I'm very uncomfortable. We've had a lot of communication internally, but I'm very sensitive about the advance notice to the public of what we're talking about and so on. And that's the only reason why. I mean, I understand how imperative the issue is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Further comment, discussion? If not, Brenda, would you call the roll?
This is the motion to suspend. Council members Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes. We've got to get her better Wi-Fi.
Kell,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Council members Hiller.
No.
So we have 8 yes, motion carries.
Okay, having moved it then to an action item, we can ask again, City Manager, for your recommendation on this item.
My recommendation on this item would be to grant permission for me to move forward with an RFP for the demolition process of 911 North Kansas. And the request would also include up to $200,000 in our surplus to pay for that, so we do not deplete the demolition fund that we currently have for other planned operations.
Thank you. We've heard the recommendation from the City Manager. What is the pleasure of the body?
Second.
Motion and a second. Councilman Lesser and Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala. Any further discussion? Councilwoman Hiller.
The question would be on the $200,000, what is the expectation that, obviously, if we're going to get it done so that the building is safe, what is the expectation of whether we would be reimbursed for that?
The normal steps would take place. The property owner would be sent the bill for the demolition. If they don't pay, then the lien is held on the property, and that's the normal process that we go through.
And we also are now doing the lien at least for a period of time, but then assessing the owner themselves. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's important.
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further discussion? Seeing none, if the clerk would call the roll vote.
Council members Ortiz,
Thumbs up.
okay.
I haven't seen her all night yet. She's
Kell,
there.
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
and Valdivia Aqua.
Yes.
9 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on then to the next non-action item, if the clerk would read.
B is discussion regarding the election of the deputy mayor by amending Charter Ordinance Number 117, Section 5, as codified at Section A226 of the Topeka Municipal Code.
Mr. City Manager?
Billy, may I take it? Thank
Okay. You wanna take it?
This is the charter ordinance requested by Councilwoman Ortiz when you were voting on the deputy mayor out of concerns that you would have expired in 2 weeks and they would have had to find someone else. So we have fixed it to state that the deputy mayor would be elected the first meeting in January so that there would not be a gap period. It is a charter ordinance, so when you vote on it next week, it will require 7 votes of the governing body.
Okay. Any further questions from the city attorney? Clarify. Deputy Mayor Duncan.
So I'm okay with this. I'm just curious. It used to be we did it the meeting after the first meeting of the year where everyone was sworn in, right? So you'd swear everyone in, new mayor, new council, and then you'd wait a week and do the, in this case, we're changing that so that everything's done the first night. Okay, I think I'm okay with that. I just wanted to clarify that that is another change in how things will be done. Does that make sense? I see a look from Councilwoman Hill.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure she understands
puzzled
that.
Oh, I'm trying to remember. I remember that it was kind of a fast forward when I was first elected, and then watching others where you just show up sort of deer in headlights, and then you sit down 2 minutes later and start voting on things, and even a week later seemed kind of soon. But I suppose there's rarely more than half of the council elected new.
Right. And the deputy mayor process, outside of me getting sandbagged this year, is traditionally a little more evenly next in line person, right? So it's a little more orderly than the others. So
Probably not much difference.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that was an additional
Thank you.
change.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll vote on it at our next meeting?
Correct.
Correct. Okay, move on to non-action item C, if the clerk would read.
C is discussion concerning the use of City of Topeka's America Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds.
City Manager?
Mayor, governing body, this is the continuation of the discussion from the ARPA workshop that we had a couple weeks ago at the Holiday Building. At that point, there was a motion that it be moved to the whole body, that a certain X number of dollars to be determined by the council be set aside for basically infrastructure. At this time, I will turn it over to Director Steve Wade, who can provide more information on this topic.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, governing body. At the workshop, Councilman Emerson asked for us to examine the impact of utility rates if ARPA money was applied, used as cash instead of borrowing for utility projects. What we determined is that the impact on short-term utility rates is negligible. There is actually no way to avoid rate increases. On the screen in front of you right now is examination of using $45 million or $30 million of ARPA money. If you notice on there, there's water, stormwater, wastewater, 24 through 2030. If you use $45 million, we anticipate that rates would have to increase 3% in 24, 25, and 26, plus 27. After that, you are at 4% or greater. 3% is the number that we are using to assume for the rate of inflation. If that rate is above that, then those rates would be increased from there. At $30 million, you would receive 3 years of a 1% break, 24, 25, and 26. And then you go back to where your rates exceed the rate of inflation. Deputy Director Malat, who's with us tonight, also noted, however, that there is a way to use ARPA funds to help lower income residents. And before we get to that, I do want to show your average household price on your water bills. So you see water, stormwater, wastewater. In 23, the average water bill, this is a 5,000 gallon usage, is just over $46. You see the $6.21 for stormwater and the $40.42 for wastewater. That's a $92.60 bill is the average bill for a household in Topeka. Assuming a 4% increase moving forward, the average price per household increase to go from 4% down to the 3% is a savings of $12.80 per year. You'll see that that's mapped out through 2031. Moving to the next slide where we have right here, again, Deputy Director Malat did note that there is a way to use ARPA money. We have a utility rate rebate fund right now that some customers qualify for. If the governing body were to dedicate an additional $100,000 a year, you would be able to double the utility rate rebate for those customers. They currently receive $150 of rate credit rebate. By applying an additional $100,000, you would be able to double that based on the current number of individuals that receive that rebate. In November,
Councilwoman Hiller?
Is that 75 to 150 or 150 to 300?
150 to 300.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
In November, the Finance Department spoke with the Infrastructure Committee and projected at that point in time, based on our general fund forecast, that the governing body would need to increase the mill levy rate by 3 mil next year. An increase of 3 mil would then allow the governing body to leave the mill levy flat through 2027. That's the forecast that was made in November. In an effort to keep from raising property taxes and water utility rates, in the same year, we did some additional analysis. The goal was to avoid increasing both. We found that using $40 million in ARPA money would allow the governing body to leave the mill levy flat through 2027. You would avoid the 3 mil increase. That's by using $40 million of ARPA money, and again, it's based on a 3% average inflation rate. The $40 million would be separate from the money that has been discussed for Polk Quincy and for parking. So the governing body would still be presented with borrowing $20 million for Polk Quincy, $7 million for parking. The reason why it is $7 million instead of 10 is the governing body has the ability to pull money from reserves. We expect 2021 revenues to come in over budget by $3 million. And so if you were to use that $3 million, in addition to 7 from reserves, you would have the $10 million of deferred maintenance that's due for parking. If that combination were to be used, the combination of the $100,000 per year for rate rebate, for ARPA, that gets you through 5 years. So that's $500,000. If you were to use that $500,000 for rate rebate and the $40 million towards geo-bonded projects, so you're paying cash instead of borrowing money, that combination would still leave about $5.2 million for social services or other projects as deemed by the governing body. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll stand for questions.
Councilwoman Valdivia.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to go back to the meeting that we had that Saturday, whatever Saturday it was. And when Councilman Emerson brought up about a 60% increase over the next 10 years, and numbers were floated about, that could be a $50 a month increase. I think Councilwoman Hiller said that could be $600 a year. People can't afford that. And now we're looking at $12, so you'll have to explain the math to me, obviously, $12.80 negligible amount. So how did we get from where we were talking about on that Saturday to what we're looking at right now?
I believe at that point in time, the discussion centered around compounded rate increases. And so you would be going, in this particular case, from a $92 bill, $92.66, to $126.81. So a $30 increase as opposed to, I think, the $50 that was bantered around. That $30 increase is per month. So you're talking $360 a year.
Like, I didn't understand any of that you just said.
I'm sorry.
So, I mean, I guess the bottom line question is, these are huge amounts that were initially talked about, where everybody was, who can afford that? And, and let's see, and there was even the move of, even if we can't keep it all flat, maybe we can do, reduce it by $10 a month or something. I think that was also part of the conversation. So is it compounding made such a difference that we are looking at these huge variations tonight?
One other reason why the variation is a little bit less is the rate increase that we were talking about that particular morning was up to 5.2%.
Okay.
As opposed to 4%. And so that differential also bounced it up a little bit.
Okay. And so what you are bringing across here to us tonight is the way to help LMI folks is put $100,000 more into that, what is it called?
It's a rate rebate fund.
It's a utility rate rebate, and they do that through CRC.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think that there's 2 buckets of money there, one for gas and electric, if I'm right, and then one for water.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and also there's one that usually goes quicker, like right away, and there's one that has carryover that never is allowed to do carryover year after year to gain some balance in it. Do you know which one that is, if it's water or if it's the gas electric, because I forget?
I can only tell you that I believe that the electric goes first.
Okay.
Because we've actually changed that percentage in 2022.
Okay, so this is where we're going to get real knee-deep into the conversation that I understand that we'll also go into next, later conversations. But let's just take that, for example. That utility rate rebate does not get out to folks, and that balance does not get depleted. I think that's $75,000 or something a year. It never goes to zero because people don't know, or they would rather get the gas and electric. But there's almost always a carryover balance, and I shouldn't call it a carryover balance because the city always takes the money back from CRC and put it back to the general fund or whatever. So as we talk about trying to help our LMI communities, I would think that that is just wrong in and of itself. We should be out there trying to promote the program more aggressively so that folks will take advantage of it. And it just really makes me wonder, how much of a difference this will make. But I'll stop there. I think that after we had Saturday's meeting, and it was a really good meeting, I mean, there was a lot of great information that went back and forth, and I definitely am still in support of the importance for debt reduction. Okay, I know that it's important. I am still going to keep on and on about we can almost be guaranteed, because we are the capital city, that we would be getting some of that spark funding. We will be getting state money, even though we have to apply for it. And I know that the city manager said, it was kind of like a contingency on why we're using ARPA money, like a contingency plan in case, we didn't get anything from the state. But we're bound to, because there's $600 million in that, of allocations to go out. So I have a real issue with when we are looking at infrastructure and understanding that there is a need for it, that we are trying to lessen, purposefully or not, the human infrastructure component that is happening in our city. I think that everybody read the public comment that Brett Martin put in to the council. We are in a bad state for where we are in this city with affordable housing, mental health, the lack of mental health and substance abuse issues, the lack of access to food with food deserts, and the lack of childcare. And we talk about this lessening of $55 million in our revenue. That was a projected how much we lost, and that ARPA funds are supposed to be used for the COVID-19 recovery. And we know that the importance of it for infrastructure, but what about the human infrastructure? A little over $5 million is not going to get it. And I'm not just talking in LMI neighborhoods. We have a mental health crisis going on in this city. We have an unsheltered chronic homeless population crisis that is going on in this city, and that is increasingly getting more and more volatile, at least in the district that I serve. And so I understand that we are in the initial conversations, but to me, if we start supporting something at $40 million and giving crumbs to our residents that are in need of help, in need of these services, to be that city that we want to be, that we keep touting we are, and we're growing into, then I believe that our actions, our words will not meet our actions. And I'm going to have more to say about this, but I just wanted to say that right off the bat. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilwoman. I think your comments are well noted, and I know I have visited a little bit with City Manager about your definition of human infrastructure. I'm interested in that. I'd like to hear your comments on that when we get an opportunity again, maybe in the workshop or separately, whenever you're available to visit with me about that. I'd like to hear that, get some more structure to that term so I better understand what you're talking about. So I appreciate your comments. Any further comments while in discussion? Councilman Duncan. I'm Deputy Mayor Duncan.
That's all right. Just happy to be called on, Mayor.
Yeah.
All right. I got questions. So I don't know who wants to answer these, but here we go. Do we have a list of specific projects that were about the bond, or that this dollars would be applied to? I mean, I understand it's paying. I mean, we can't pay debt, so we're paying for projects instead of bonding them, right? To sort of, we're backdooring this a little bit, right? But I mean, do we have a list of what projects would then be covered under this $40 million? I mean, I don't need that list this second, but I'm just saying, is that something that can be provided to us so we know exactly what we're putting it towards?
There is currently $59 million of previously approved GEO bond projects in the CIP. This would be using $40 million of that 59. So the direct answer to your question is, which ones we don't have the list, but we do have a list of the projects that it could be used for. Okay, I mean, so that'd be helpful, because I know obviously the CIP is bigger than that 59. If we could see that list of the GEO bonded projects, that would be helpful. Yep. Does that 59 include Polk Quincy? No, sir, it does not. Okay, so, and the reason I get a little confused is too strong of a word here, but we keep interjecting Polk Quincy into these discussions. So the inference is we're going to try or attempt to use ARPA money for Polk Quincy. And to be honest, I can't tell if that's your position as a staff at this point or not, because we keep throwing it in with the discussion, which kind of
muddles it up as to whether we're targeting ARPA dollars to that project. Because I'm getting that question from people, and honestly, I don't know the answer.
Yeah, Councilman Duncan, that's a good question, and that has been mentioned and kicked back and forth. One of the fortunate things is we've been working with KDOT and all that, and we feel very comfortable where we're at on what we were anticipating was going to be expenses that we may not encumber. And so, been provided that information on utility work and stuff that's going to be allowed. And so it looks like we won't need an additional $20 million, which was originally thought of at the beginning when the utility works and all the side repairs to the streets and improvements to the infrastructure around the city of Topeka to carry the traffic flow. And so that's why we have backed off on that conversation of $20 million of ARPA funds towards Polk Quincy.
Okay, cool. So the question was, are we thinking about this time using ARPA funds towards the Polk Quincy project?
No.
Okay, that's helpful. The comment was made that we will have $3 million of surplus from 21. I thought we had $3 million, dedicated that $3 million. So are you not telling us our surplus will be $6 million, or are you asking us to redirect the already allocated $3 million?
We committed, Councilman, 3.5 of expense savings. This is $3 million of revenue overage. So yes, we're estimating your total variance to budget to be about $6.5 million.
Okay. Can you walk me through real quick I don't need the dates, I'm not asking for the whole, but when we start bonding Polk Quincy, that will not happen immediately, correct? I mean, we could be several years out
We've actually,
from bonding the full 20 million, or have we already?
by contract, sir, we've actually committed our first $5 million this month. So it's $5 million for the next 4 years is our contractual commitment.
Okay, so we were already bonding 5. I mean, I'm asking, what is our timeline for the whole 20, the whole pot? By the time the last day again, I don't need the exact, January, but I mean, are we talking 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 5 years? I mean,
It's $20 million, $5 million over 4 years.
Okay. So by the end of the next 4 years, we will have bonded all $20 million. Okay, great. We have talked about grants for that project. Have we applied for anything? Do we know any timelines on those? Are we hopeful of any timelines, whether it's rejection or acceptance? Do we?
Yes, sir. We had our first meeting last week with the company that we had been talking to previously about doing the grant applications. We have another conference call tomorrow afternoon with them to get more specifically on which ones to apply for. In the conversation that we had with them, they also recommended some other grants to go for as well. And so that conversation will be centered on that tomorrow. And most of those applications, they said, will be starting about the middle of the month is when they'll start taking applications on those grants.
Okay, so hopefully, maybe in the next 4 years, as we bond the full $20 million, we may hopefully defer some of that. Which goes, and the reason I'm asking those questions is when we talk about any possibility of ARPA towards that, I look at the factor that hopefully we may get some grants. We're 4 years out from finishing that complete total amount, and that sort of does impact where I look at whether ARPA dollars should, and I know you're saying they're not at this time, but should be spent towards that because there's some different factors versus projects we already have in the pipeline and have already sort of bonded forward. I promise I only got about 2 more questions here. Maybe 3. My 3. If it's not 3, Delaware doesn't think I'm doing my job. So there was one more. Usually. Actually, I may just have 2 more. I gotta write them down, I try. Can we get a list of all the reserve funds across all departments in city government and what those balances are, please? Because those pop up every once in a while. Oh, we have a reserve fund over here in utilities, we have a reserve, and to this day, I couldn't tell you how many reserve funds this city has or what the balances are. And I understand the money may be already spent or something, but it would be really helpful to have that information in front of us.
If I could have your permission, we'd like to be able to close 2021 before we give you those numbers, because those numbers are in flux right now.
Gotcha. No, that's fine. I think as we go, not just talking about utilities and ARPA and those, it would be helpful.
Yes, we can.
So, awesome. That's it for tonight. I have a few others, but they can wait. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia-Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. One more question and then some comments. And I watched the whole meeting that we had on that Saturday so long ago. And I'm thinking about some of the comments that have been made as we go into this very deeply transitional time of where we are as a city, but where every other city is as well in the United States, right? Where things are changing and shifting, and a lot of it is scary feelings for families, for individuals, for small businesses, et cetera. And I'm not picking on anybody when I say this, but I'm really clinging to when I heard Councilman Dobler say, we got to do things different. I really cling to that, probably because you remind me of my grandfather or something. I don't know.
Could have been uncle.
That was not in my tradition. Grandfathers hold a very high place, but I'm not saying you're there yet. So, and so that keeps, as we go through all this tension, all of this looking at how people want it, to go different ways, and that we all don't vote the same, et cetera, et cetera. I still hold on to that we are a council that, even though there's a lot of ebb and flow and friction at times, that when the really difficult stuff comes to task, that we take it up and we can more or less align. Then with Mayor Padilla on that Saturday, where you said that you liked the idea about moving that infrastructure component, to have more of that done in LMI communities. Not saying that it couldn't be done, because this is what we could be looking at, but I'm just talking in general. Because you had said that for any number of reasons, that the city at one time or another had certain expenses and didn't have the opportunity for the positive impact that we wanted for everyone in this community to have. And so now, to support with ARPA long-term changes into those neighborhoods, they have been waiting for a long time. And I believe that you are absolutely true when you said that. You have known, and we've all known, for whatever reasons, the councils before us did not take into this deep dive planning for our infrastructure. And so it's up to us now and councils in the future to deal with it. But with the amount of human need that is out there, which this money is also supposed to be a part of, we are also shortchanging them if we think only the infrastructure will be the answer. I don't know what Karen's district is like. I don't know what Sylvia's district is like, et cetera, District 4, whatever. All I can tell you is that there is so much need in the community, and these are hardworking people. They're not just doing whatever. And they have been jolted to the core by COVID. So many of us have. And I just believe that community money pot needs to get more than that $5 million or $6 million. And so, again, I think I was going to say something else, but I forgot what it was. So thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Further comments, discussion? Councilman Dobler.
At least you didn't call me grandfather,
Yeah.
Dope. Appreciate that.
Uncle Dobler.
Yeah. You know, that was really uncalled for. Thank you, Mayor. I would like a little bit of information. I agree that we've got an opportunity to do some really good things. We also have a need to lessen our debt in this community, and we have to pay attention to that. This is a little chunk of a lot of money that's come to state and local governments. I'd like to know, not right now, but soon, how much the county got, how much in ARPA funding the county received, and what they are doing with those funds. I believe 70% or so of the county is in the city limits of Topeka. They have a similar obligation, and I'd like to know what they're doing. I'd like to know the state funding. Somebody mentioned 600 million, whatever. Sounds pretty good. We ought to get our chunk. I'd like to know where that's going. Again, in an effort not to duplicate. We've got a lot of folks with a lot of needs, real needs, asking for this pot of money. There's a lot of pots of money. Let's make sure we're not duplicating that funding. Let's make sure we make the best use of really what's going to, by the time we're done, 45 million, man, that sounds like a lot. By the time we're done with this, it's not going to seem like very much because it's going to be spread so thin. I just want to make sure that everybody that received ARPA funding that is part of this community, whether they're the county or the state, is also putting their dollars towards things that make a difference. Thank you.
City Manager and then Councilman Kell.
Yeah, Councilman Dobler, the county received approximately the same amount of money that we did. They're spending, so about half of that is being spent on renovations of the courthouse and mitigation of COVID stuff like that. They've also are looking at spending funds for, I don't know if I'm at liberty to say publicly what a couple of the entities are within the community. And I have asked them if there's any projects that we can jointly work on, and we're looking at some of those projects at this time.
You'll get us more information then?
Councilman Kell.
Is there any way we can get a new updated priority list? I know the old priority list was done by the former city manager, who's no longer with us, but some things have changed, I believe. And I believe if we get every department, we know what each departments are, all staffing through every department, and then just kind of maybe like what roads and other structural projects that might need to be done that aren't currently on any list, so we can look at these projects when deciding these type of things, because I know we all want to do what's best with this money, but I'm looking also short-term fixes that can go long-term by fixing a roof at a firehouse, keeps that firehouse going for another 10 years, let's say, because it doesn't have mold and other things growing in it. I want to see those type of things, so that way we know where we're sitting, because that priority list was done by the former city manager. We can't answer to that priority list anymore.
If I could, Councilman Duncan.
Yeah, so that priority list is now archival. It does not exist. It is somewhere lost in the minutes of time, never to be, well, I won't say discussed again. It's not Voldemort, but but that priority list was put out by City Manager Trout at the time, and then as he was leaving, essentially this body decided to reboot, which was our January session. So there is no list at this time. The priority list, what you'll see for most of those departments, is in our CIP. If you go back through that CIP, those are the projects that we're trying to fund, we can look at. And so I think the two things in front of us now, and there could be a third option next week, we'll see, is, we discussed $35 million at one point, or some sum being given to the city to come up with a list, whether that's a priority list like that, or the new proposal before us dedicate $40 million to what was outlined before. And I think that's where we're at. I don't think at this point there's any other list, so just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager had a comment as well.
Mayor, I think Councilman Duncan hit it on the head for me.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Kell.
Well, my priority list was not stuff that's already on, the CIP, but things that we can look at outside of that spectrum that are already scheduled or ready to go, but stuff that we can look at and say, this road hasn't been touched in forever. It's not be scheduled to be touched for 5 years, but it's a terrible road. Or, for instance, the firehouse. We have a firehouse with a leaky roof. If it's not on the schedule to be taken care of, that's what I'm saying. A priority list of stuff that's not already on the books ready to go project-wise, but stuff that's we can look at beyond that scope of that, and get all the departments to get us that list. We can look where we need to put our focus in those areas.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to say thank you for the work that you did. We had that idea about the utility rates, and really appreciate that deep dive and the feedback. And I also appreciate, just related to the utilities, that question was asked in terms of an idea in part of providing relief to those who most need it. And actually what you've proposed lets those who can afford to pay for those utility rates pay for it, but proposes additional money for those who really need it. And I just appreciate the thought process in that. And of course, the idea of 40 million, I do think we've spent, each year we spend months on the CIP. And so we have there is a facilities program in there, and then the street projects of high priority have been staged based on not closing all north-south streets that are adjacent to one another at the same time and that sort of thing. So I do think a fundamental then that really is underneath all this is, do we use that money to offset those projects which we already have, to really knock back the need to raise taxes in the future, or do we add in things that had been set down the line? And I really like the idea of just taking care of those things that we already had prioritized in order and getting them knocked out. Something we have to think about if we're thinking about adding projects is the capacity of our community to do that work, our staff to do extra projects, and how many contractors are out there and whether they can handle it. They may be able to grow, but it's tough to just do a really big peak and then drop back again and be able to hire our local people to do everything. So I really like how sound this is progressing. On Polk Quincy, just to reiterate, I think Steve made it clear here that Polk Quincy was not supposed to be included in this consideration, but I too I hope we're still doing negotiations, because I look at Uncle Neil, whatever, when we set that 20 million aside in its own line item, because we were hoping that we wouldn't have to pay it at all. Then, the understanding then was that we should have been able to get grants to cover at least half, if not all, of our share of that. And the discussion of what we have to pay for has morphed. And also, I hope things are underway to actually plan out and put price tags on the things that we're doing on the ground that are not part of the viaduct itself, because those are expenses. But I'm still hopeful that we can negotiate the maximum of our total obligation to 20 million and then get the grants to knock it out. So I think I've said that before, but to restate that, and also to support then keeping any consideration of Polk Quincy out of ARPA, and also continuing to leave it in its own line item so we can keep working on it. Did you want to respond to that?
No, I got some for the mayor.
Also, I've heard this conversation a little bit about throwing out the old list, but what I recalled on the list that we got was some things were the city manager's idea, but other things were things that staff had been asked to spend a fair amount of time developing, and other things that were on that list were ideas that had been submitted by the public. And I personally have a problem with just throwing it out. I would like to see it annotated in terms, and I've asked for this before, but I haven't heard it coming back. So I'd like to see it annotated in terms of whether there are other sources of ARPA or other money or entities that are taking care of that. And I'll throw out childcare because it's come up. If Childcare Aware is our coordinator for that, and there's money coming through the state and other initiatives through the Biden administration, so we can make it a priority, but not take on something that normally we don't manage or fund. I'm good with that, but for me, taking the lists of ideas that have been put forth from whoever they came, and identifying that they're taken care of, to me, that makes it a little easier to sift out and see what's left. That's just an idea and how much it adds up to, and consider, let's assume we agree to this, and so we've got 5.6 million that we're looking at. I don't want to start from scratch again, and I don't want all the people who took the staff or the people who, if the staff got asked to do something they didn't really think was important, I want to know that, okay? But the public that turned things in, I don't want to ask them to have to do it again. I appreciate the effort that they made to let us know. So wanted to make those comments. Also, when we met on the 18th, didn't we agree maybe on February the 12th for a next Saturday work session? I haven't gotten a meeting planner for it. It makes me nervous if I'm supposed to be counting on something and it's not on my calendar yet. So maybe before we leave today, I'd like to confirm on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Councilwoman Ortiz would like to call in and make comments. She's not able to.
Okay.
So if you will permit me, I will call her and get her on and put her on the microphone.
Certainly.
While she's calling in.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, and so maybe I overspoke it. I think our bucket 2 plan that we discussed at that workshop is still in play. Once we determine what that bucket 2 will be, 5.6 million, whatever, I think then the thought process was it goes to the committee to decide not just an application, but take those things that were submitted from the community, come back to this body with a process. This is our process we want to go through towards disseminating, picking what those projects are. And I think it should have been implied that those projects previously submitted would be brought back into that discussion, and it also opens up some sort of process maybe for new ideas, suggestions, and comments. But I think that's why at the workshop we talked about sending that process for discussion to the committee to bring back to this body to have that discussion. So I'm just want to throw out there, I'm not sure we've decided what that process is yet.
Councilwoman Ortiz, and then Councilwoman Hiller, and then Councilwoman Valdivia-Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to apologize
Can you mute your
for my
computer?
for my technical difficulties. I think I am muted. Okay.
There
Can
we
you
go.
hear me? What I wanted to talk about was Impact Avenue, and I'll be asking staff to provide that to us. It's a program that started 4 years ago. It's been privately funded. They have, am I not muted?
She needs to turn her volume on her computer down.
The volume on your computer down, if you can.
Okay, hold on. Is that better?
A little bit. Go ahead.
Okay, so they have all the data-driven figures, and if you haven't heard about it, what they do is they go and they work with families, and they help them from becoming homeless. They help them with shelter. They help them mental behavior, whatever they need to get them jobs and to get them places to live. And so I will be asking Corey to sending that forward. That is about $500,000. The city has never bought into it or paid anything into it. It's all been private sectors. And I would like to see us put something in it to continue to keep this going. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I might have misunderstood. I guess I thought that the press misstated what we came up with in January about whatever we just, if we make a major decision on X amount or more will go to infrastructure, and then a different amount to be considered for the rest. When we talked about it, I thought it was fine if the committee wanted to go ahead and start framing out what an RFP questionnaire would look like, what the process would look like. But I thought that our commitment was that the council as a body would decide, would then be able to focus on whatever that remainder amount was and decide if they wanted to do more of it on infrastructure or all on grants, but would also then lay out what kind of categories as a body that they wanted to look at. Because I remembered us talking way back at the beginning that we didn't want to ask anybody to spend time doing a proposal until we as a body had decided what we wanted to fund. And I guess that's why I wanted to have some assistance in identifying those ideas that had come forward before, that there was funding from someplace else, kind of similar to what Neil's proposing, but kind of approaching it from a different direction of if money's available from someplace else, and particularly if it'll continue to be available as well, then it made it easier to identify what things were hanging out. And I didn't see us handing that responsibility to the committee, but instead only the processing once we decided what we wanted to consider. Does that make sense? Just okay.
Councilwoman,
Yeah, I think we're sort of saying the same thing. Just in,
Okay.
I think we're cross-talking on accident here. Yes, the idea was that committee could start that application process, then come back to this body and say, okay, what's missing from here? What other questions do we need to ask? What parameters do we want to create? And then open that process up. Let that committee collect all that, then bring everything back and say, here we go. Now let's open that discussion. So yeah, the committee doing sort of the clerical work, if you will.
Yeah.
The body doing the larger operation. Yes, so that's what I mean.
But if, for instance, we had 10 different categories of things we might possibly consider, and the council as a body said, well, we really, that one's being covered here and that one's being covered here, so we want to only talk about 4, kind of like we do in the social service grant process.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Good discussion. Further? I'm going to make sure that everybody has a chance before we move on. I think this is helpful. I look forward to that. Is it going to be February the 2nd for our next workshop?
Well, that was at the workshop, that date was thrown out. The question becomes, because this topic was supposed to be an action item originally, and there was a change to a discussion item, and so that pushed it back a week. And so the question is, does the governing body still wish to meet on that Saturday, or do we want us to look for an alternative date?
Well, for my part, I think we're doing a good job of vetting all the concerns and interests and not rushing.
Get your mic on.
Okay. Not rushing to turn my mic on. I think we're doing a good job of giving us some time to continue to discuss this. And I like the step-by-step approach to it. For my part, I'm comfortable having another meeting so that we can work out those details, but get an idea from the body. Any comments? Councilwoman Valdivia-Acala and then Councilman Kell.
Thank you, Mayor. I would say I definitely think that we should have another meeting. However, I believe that it is important that we allow public comment at that meeting, because agencies that are really in the trenches and really doing the work, and it's not rocket science to determine which ones really are and which ones aren't, they need to give, in my opinion, folks on the council a glimpse of what is happening in communities where that additional help and support is needed. Yes, at the same time as we service reduction of the debt. I think it's just important. It's vital. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Kell?
Kind of agree with the councilwoman there on that aspect, because this way we can at least look at where we're going at, because there might be an organization that, this is in the title says relief. There's been some organizations that the doors were shut for a year and a half, and they lost whatever that they were working for. A good example is the Topeka Civic Theater, and they do so much good for this community, but we don't know what their need is at this time because of what they lost. So if we have organizations like that and other social needs organizations come us and tell us kind of what their needs are and why they are the way they are, then we can get a better idea of what we need to be doing with this on the aspect of the social needs thing, and also helping Topeka as a whole and its organizations.
Thank you. Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I share the same sentiments that Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala and Councilman Kells share. I would possibly, though, pivot that I think it may be helpful if we set out a way that those individuals, those organizations, especially the organizations such that can put that to us in writing. The way I see this is having a Saturday meeting, if it's going to be public comment to come and talk, it's just going to go on and on and on. And I'll be honest with you, just human nature is we're going to lose our attention span to do that. And I think it could be more beneficial if they put what their needs, their reasoning, that we had it. So when I can sit down and evaluate things, I'm able to do that. Otherwise, I mean, how long are we going to let them talk? 15 minutes, 4 minutes, 3? They can't probably convey it in 4 minutes. 15 minutes, we're going to be there. It's going to be a 3-day seminar. It's not going to be, so that I'm just suggesting that, and I do that because then I can go back and refer to the information as I research which way I want to go. So I just throw that out as a possible way to obtain the public comment.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Kell?
Could we at least have department heads there to be able to answer questions if we have questions on that throughout the discussion process? Because I believe that as part of the public comment, and part of the thing is, the only good thing about having people there is when we have a question, the question's asked, we all hear it at once, we all can follow up at once, rather than through an email that we get that says, here's what we want, why. Well, I reply with one question, get kicked back, and after a while, if we get those reply alls, that's when we get into some of our legal issues as a group. So we might, I know it could turn out to be a very long day, but without being able to go back and forth with some of these, we're not going to get the full picture.
City Manager, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so the way this was to work was there was a motion that's brought up for tonight that X number of dollars would be allocated for infrastructure, and then the remainder to be determined. And then at the next meeting on February 15th, we would then be talking about the X number of dollars that were not allocated, and that would be where we'd establish the process on how we were going to collect information. If you remember, we talked about an application process, and we have received the application from planning that they use for the subcommittee on the grants, and we are tweaking that. So that was kind of the process. So now the question is, next week this is set for a action item on X number of dollars to be allocated. So the question I have for you is, do you want to continue with that or remove that from next week, have the 15th meeting, and then we pick up after that?
Councilwoman Hiller.
I had a thought kind of along those lines. What if we opened up the meeting on the 8th, instead of having an action item, had that be an opportunity for people. It's a short deadline, but we don't want full proposals. We just want people to tell us what they think we could do and why it would be important. If we instead offered public comment next week or submissions in writing so that we had them, and then did not take public comment, just had our work session on the Saturday after that. If all that was in by Tuesday, then staff would have time to make a list of those things. And maybe that way we could just really work it and talk about it on the Saturday. It's hard for citizens to come on a Saturday. I think the evening is better for a time to come and give the testimony. It's just a thought to keep it moving.
Thank you. Further comment? I'd like to offer that I like the idea that we have an application process, that we continue with that application process, and then on recommendation by the city manager, if he feels that there's follow-up and necessary conversations to be had with any of the applicants, that those that you go through them, bring them to the body in a manner so that everybody gets their opportunity. But I agree with Councilman Lesser. It's a long ask on a Saturday, and we want to be efficient in what we're doing. And I think it's important for us to look at the time commitment that it's going to take from both staff, this body, and as Councilwoman Hiller says, how it may impact individuals who cannot make it on a Saturday morning for a long extended meeting. So for me, I'd like to continue with the application process as has been proposed. Councilwoman Valdivia-Acala.
I agree with the process that Councilwoman Hiller is talking about. Either have them submit it by next Tuesday and not an application. Correct. Why they believe ARPA funds are needed within community coming from their social service perspective. So that what we want to see is through their eyes, through the written word or through their commentary for 4 minutes, what they see as the needs, which is totally different than an application or putting out a plea for funds. If we're concise in that, then that's how we can receive the written, the written component. And then if anybody else wants to come up, the parameters are clear. That's it. We need to see through their eyes why. No application, no going on and on and on about, why they need this and what they will do with it. That's going to be the application process.
Okay. Councilman Dover.
First.
No, I got you.
Yeah, this is going nowhere. So you're suggesting that they just come for public comment during the action item, is that correct?
I agree with her that this would be just recommendations. What do you recommend that we do this for?
I'm not asking what the content is.
Yeah.
Well, as opposed to an application.
Right. But we have an action item on next week for the ARPA funds. And are you suggesting that people sign up for public comment? Or are you suggesting some other kind of type of comment?
I'm suggesting that we don't do action, but we do take public comment, and then we have our work session on Saturday.
So we delay this another week or two or whatever. Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia-Acala, do you have something?
I agree with her, what she said.
What she said?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I think Councilman Lesser.
I do want one point of clarification, though. Are we saying, though, at some point in time there is going to be an application process, though, correct? Yes, I want to make sure. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So the direction for us is?
The direction, I believe, is that suggested that we put it for public comment, and as we have done, give them an opportunity for 4 minutes. We'll take that public comment, and then we'll continue with our meeting as planned with consideration of those comments that we received.
And so there will be an action item?
Yep.
Okay. And public comments, my recommendation?
No, just a public comment, no
Okay.
action item.
No action item. And in that 4 minutes, the recommendation I would present to the governing body would be that the individuals state how much they want, how they were impacted by the pandemic.
No. It's not an application.
Clarification, please.
It's what they recommend we should do with the money. It is not an application.
Okay, their recommendation.
Because we want to hear the recommendations from the public, at which point then we can go into our work session, hopefully come to some consensus on Saturday the 12th, and we'll know how much we were going to set aside for infrastructure and how much we want to do for applications and what for, so that the parameters are there. And nobody spends time doing an application for something that we didn't, in a category that we didn't identify as a target. Make that, okay.
So,
I see some scratching heads.
no.
Deputy Mayor?
So, let's go through this. Tuesday the 8th, public comment. Saturday the 12th, workshop. Then I don't know what the next Tuesday is. Action item. Right?
We're ready.
Right, after workshop, but we're action item. I think that's the direction there. That makes more sense? All right.
I like that.
Councilman Valdivia-Acqua.
And again, just for those listening out there in TV land, like Councilwoman Hiller said, and we said 4 minutes, what you're seeing on the ground through your eyes as a social service agency, through your eyes as a person that lives in a neighborhood, what you see, where you think it should be spent. We don't want dollar amounts. We don't want to know why you need the money. We don't want to know what you're going to do with the money. We just need to have a snapshot in time about what's going on in the different parts of the city and where you all believe the need is. Period. That's it. Application process later.
Councilman Lesser.
The only other thing that I would suggest too, that as a governing body, we agree that there's not going to be any extensions to this 4 minutes, that everybody is prepared, and we're not giving the person who was prepared and had their information in order, 4 minutes, and the other person's not going to get 6. We'll call it the Ledbetter rule.
Councilman.
Well,
Councilwoman Hiller.
to support the lesser rule, an alternative or a combination would be to submit a written suggestion so that we can collect those. And so whether if people can't come or choose to just submit that that's okay, right? Or bring it with them.
Councilman Lesser.
Yeah, I think that's fine. People who've been here know that I've always been a proponent of, if you got 4 minutes, you got 4 minutes. Prepare before you come to get it in 4 minutes, or if it's 6 and we decide we want to give people 6, then it's 6. But whatever it is, it becomes an unfair, or we just keep giving extensions all the time.
Councilwoman Valdivia-Acqua.
Then why do you always give Ledbetter more time?
Off subject. Sorry.
Okay. Councilman Callan, then I'd like to move on, please, to public comment.
Are we going to allow for follow-up questions on those, and during that, after that 4 minutes, or whenever, to get any clarification, or?
No.
Not when we do it that way.
It's just a presentation. No giving back and forth.
Those work really well. We've had good experience with that, actually.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment. We do have 2 people signed up for public comment.
We have 3 people.
Oh, I didn't see them on here. Okay.
So they're going to get ahead of next week.
Yeah. We have 3 people signed up for discussion on this item. Mr. Brett Martin.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I think the things I'll say will inform much of the conversation that was just had. My name is Rhett Martin. I serve as a Vice President of Community Impact at United Way of Greater Topeka. Since March of 2020, we've convened what's known as the COVID-19 Group, a gathering of many cross-sector organizations, city, county, state, nonprofit, school districts, private business, and others who've gathered to respond to the pandemic. Tonight, I'm here to speak on behalf of 10 of those organizations: Community Action, Doorstep, East Topeka Council on Aging, Positive Connections, Salvation Army, Topeka Habitat for Humanity, Topeka Jump, Topeka Rescue Mission, Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library, Vallejo, and the YWCA of Northeast Kansas. Over these past 98 weeks, there are a number of issues that continue to emerge in our weekly meetings. Among these are safe and affordable housing, mental health and substance abuse, access to food, and access to affordable child care. Among this group, there's a great deal of expertise, skill, and experience, and this list of issues have come out of the lived experience of neighbors, many of whom are our most vulnerable. These were certainly issues that were important before the pandemic, but as we all know, they've been exacerbated over the last 2 years. Our community is faced with a unique opportunity as we have received more than $45 million ARPA dollars. As you consider how best to use those dollars and create the most impact for Topeka, we, as these 11 organizations, ask you to consider the following. First, seek input from our community. The importance of public input for the design of any system or program like this cannot be overstated. Residents across the community, those who live in neighborhoods, NAs, NIAs, and other areas have a great deal to tell us about their experience and about our community. What we've learned over the past year through our community health needs assessment process, and what United Way of Greater Topeka has learned over the last 2 weeks of 9 community meetings, is that public input, asking the community what's important, asking what their needs are, what their strengths are, asking where they hope to see their neighborhoods in 3, 5, or 10 years, is central to getting it right when we design systems and programs. So we urge you to seek community input in the use of these ARPA dollars. Second, we ask for direct investment in human infrastructure, the systems and programs that directly impact the families in our community who need it most. The list I mentioned earlier is a great start. During your ARPA meeting on Saturday, and as you've said here, it became clear that you want to provide relief to LMI families. We believe the best way to provide relief to these families is to invest in them directly, to invest in this human infrastructure, these systems, programs, services in our neighborhoods that create both immediate and long-term impacts. Finally, we ask you to imagine using these once-in-a-generation dollars to do something great, something we can be proud to tell our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. Something that creates lasting change in neighborhoods and households across our communities, some of which have been neglected for decades. We have a unique opportunity through these dollars to invest directly in the families that need it most. We urge you to invest in our people and make the future bright for all of Topeka. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I have next Pastor Carl Frazier on Zoom.
Yes.
There he is.
Thank you. To the mayor, city council, and interim city manager. My name is Pastor Carl Frazier. I am the pastor of New Hope and Love Community Church here in Topeka. Under my faith, it said, well, when I was hungry, you gave me food, no food. When I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. When I was a stranger, you did not take me in naked, you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, you did not visit me. We, as I am the vice chair of the Topeka Jump, it brings to me great joy that I'm able to stand before you in all unity tonight with great organization in the city of Topeka trying to increase the affordable housing trust fund through offering the funds. We believe there is power in relationship. Building, Topeka Jump has showed we have built relationship with 31 churches such as First Baptist, Fellowship Bible, Christ the King, Temple of Beth Salome, El Shaddai Ministry, and many, many more congregations throughout Shoning County. Plus, we have talked and collaborated with many organizations, and 6 of us have signed the letters to support what we are asking for the $5 million for the Affordable Housing Fund, where various housing projects can be supported, where ARPA money can be leveraged at a ratio of 1:6. We look forward to making a proposal to the committee designated to oversee the proposal process. I understand there were an initial proposal allocated of $35 million ARPA funds out of the $45 million for utilities, water, and sewage improvement. Perhaps has changed. If so, that is great. JUMP supports some ARPA funds being used for infrastructure improvement, but we also concerned about the amount. We believe the city neighborhood health map should be used to prioritize which neighborhoods these ARPA funds dollars should be used in. We are pleased that the city realized that the harsh impact of increased water and sewage utility rates and the need to take steps to reduce the impact on lower and middle-class families. We also concerned about 78% of this once-in-a-generation windfall going to the need, and would like the government body to reconsider the amount to make room for 2 or 3 other areas of needs, housing, mental health, to be prioritized to ARPA money. I would like to thank you for your consideration of supporting the people of this community who want to see the housing equity and affordable housing prioritized, many of who have supported you in your office. We realize that human sacrifice is very important, and we hope that you will look at more so not only infrastructure, but people structure. God bless each of you and your family. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Pastor. And we have a third gentleman, Mr. Joseph Ledbetter.
Thank you, governing body. I'll jump quickly in this. I'm going to skip public comments, so I've already emailed those to you. So I'll save you 4 minutes there. The Ledbetter rule. Thank you. I like the idea of this $40 million going to reduce GO bond indebtedness. If they'd said revenue bonds, I would have had a different opinion. We should not have borrowed many of the revenue bonds, in my opinion, that we borrowed. That amount of borrowing went out of control with the last manager, and I hope we've learned some serious lessons about that, because we have not seen the productivity of getting those water lines replaced that we were promised. So if we earmark any money towards those pipes, we must make sure that that first 6 miles got done also in those same years, because we are, as the previous gentleman just said, we are paying much higher water rates now than what we were even a few years ago. But we were promised those replacements, and they have not been met. There was a discussion about we need $10 million for parking garages to pay for maintenance. I have a better idea. I've brought that up several times. Let's sell some of them off. It's time. It's okay to call that number, and I don't think the city needs to manage. I think we've got 9 of them, but I think there is a possibility of selling at least a few of those off, and not having to have that extra maintenance money. Housing incentives, I've talked to you about this. I've emailed you some comments as well while I was sitting here. I would like to see some money set aside for new housing construction, so that developers, owners would build houses again in Topeka. I know some are being built, but it's minuscule compared to the amount that are built outside the city. We need more housing in the city, built in the city, single units, duplexes. This will add to our tax base. You could be adding as much as maybe $50 million a year in tax base if you had the right incentive program, and they don't have to cost that much. New water meters, free water meters, taken out of the utility funds. I think the last time I checked, they were at 50% reserves, and I think it's higher than that in that fund now. But it creates long-term customers, and those people are going to stay with you, and hopefully they'll stay living here for a long time, helping pay the sales taxes and other things that residents actually help pay. So, my time. One of the things that I just picked up this book and read it, We the Possibility. It's from Harvard. It talks about things I've talked about down here before. I've talked about dealing with people's concerns with urgency, dealing with them with empathy, all these things these previous speakers are talking about. One of the things you can do outside of spending these new monies is just enforce the codes on housing. There is probably a pool of, God only knows, 20, 30 million a year that private landlords could put into their own properties if the codes were enforced adequately and with consistency. New furnaces, new windows, new this, new that. 42% of our residents live in rental property. And so there are many things we could do to increase the productivity of our staff as well. But I don't think we can ever turn away from our responsibility to enforce the codes that would probably handle a lot of the problems that we're hearing about. My time is up. Thank you very much. And as I said, I've already emailed my public comments, so I don't need to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. That's the last person signed up for public comment on the non-action item C, so we'll move on to public comment since Mr. Ledbetter has kindly given us the extra 4 minutes. We have Mr. John Rush to speak. Mr. Rush?
Hello. My name is John Rush, and Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and Madam Clerk. I actually came to talk to ask. Everyone has been given a handout about what had happened to me and my wife, or my wife and I, and it had 3 dates on it, and now there's another one, and the other date would be October the 1st. And October the 1st, I had asked for the chamber. I had not been here before that time. I'd asked for the chamber's address, and I went to the Topeka Police Department and asked for that, and there was a young gentleman, a man of color. He was obviously on light duty. He was working behind the desk, and I had asked for the address to the chamber because I wanted to give everyone just give them those 3 dates, and then I wanted to come speak. So, well, he gave me my district for council members' address. So indiscriminately, I went to his address thinking that I was going to the city council chambers. And so when I realized that it was not his address, I had already spoke to a gentleman there, another man of color, and he had said that Tony lived there. And I was a little confused, but because I had been given an address that I thought was the city council chamber. So anyway, Tony had called the Topeka police chief and said he wanted the service to ask about my 3 dates and if he knew anything about these dates. So anyway, so Tony had texted me a couple of times, once Friday and one Saturday, and I missed him. I'm not tied to my phone, and I didn't mean to miss him or anything. But anyway, I talked to Tony on, then that would have been October 1st, okay? So now on October 4th, I talked to Tony on the phone, and Tony, I explained to Tony what was going on, and I was a little more elevated than I am now because Tony had since then told me that I seemed a little odd, and I would say that I was a little bit more. It seemed to me, in my opinion, it's creepy to have a helicopter over the top of your house. Now, what I came here for was to talk to Tony directly and just ask him, because he said that he would clear it up with the police, with the Topeka police chief, and I had asked him if he would just give me that in writing, because what I'm trying to do is just take care of one thing at a time. And so I asked him to give me an affidavit, and that would be, may seem a little stiff, but all I'm doing is asking for Police Chief Brian Willis, or someone to give me verification that he's cleared that up with them, that it was a confusion, that I left these 3 dates with him at his house to whoever it was that I had interacted with. And so that's the only reason I'm here today, is because I just want to take care of one thing at a time, and I'm still working. I know more about what's going on now, but that's all I came here for, was to ask Tony Emerson, my city council member. I'm his constituent, and I just wanted to know that that's cleared up with the police. So that's why I was here, and he can text me that or whatever, and I appreciate it. Once again, the meeting of the minds, I really appreciated. I really enjoyed the meeting tonight. I see there's a lot of diversity, and I see that everybody's working in the same direction.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Okay. We've completed our public comment section. Now we'll move on to announcements. City Clerk.
So for the February 8th meeting, we have one board appointment to the Human Relations Commission. We have 2 presentations, Utilities Department fourth quarter report and Public Works Department fourth quarter report. Action items include a resolution setting a public hearing date of March 15 to consider establishing the Noto Arts and Entertainment Business Improvement District. And then we have the charter ordinance amendment for deputy mayor elections. We removed the resolution for the ARPA funding. It will be moved to a discussion item and/or public comment input. And then the other 2 action items will be a discussion on the International Energy Conservation Code, the IECC, and the International Existing Building Code, the IEBC.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
The only thing I have, Mayor and governing body, is that due to the impending weather situation and everything closing around us, only essential personnel will be reporting to work tomorrow.
Thank you.
Surprise.
You're essential, correct?
I am essential.
Okay. We'll move on. Yeah. Can we get a consensus? Yeah. Councilman Lesser, any announcements? Okay. Councilwoman Hiller.
Well, if I can, do you know if the police graduation is still, and luncheon is still going to go on tomorrow?
Chief
Police graduation is still going to go on.
Okay.
It has to for the other commitments we have with the rest of their schedule.
Okay, just checking. I had it on my calendar. I just had one. Well, thank everybody. I agree with our guest that was here earlier. This is really good discussion and covered a lot of ground. I wanted to invite everyone that, remind everyone that the applications are open for the Mosaic Partner Pairs program right now. I've been involved with that with Topeka United. And if anyone personally is interested or knows someone that might appreciate that opportunity, let me know, and I'm happy to get hold of them. And that's it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia-Acala.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a reminder, make sure that you have gas in your cars. Make sure that your windshield wipers are working. Make sure that if you're traveling too far that you have emergency items in your vehicles. Watch out for your pets. Make sure that they are warm and have water, because it's going to be getting really cold the next several nights. Check on elders, especially elders that believe that they need to have their thermostats set really, really low. Check on each other and be safe. That's it, Mayor.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Uh-oh,
Councilwoman Ortiz, can you hear us? She frozen again.
might need to get the phone going again.
Well, we'll move on. I'll move on to Councilman Kell.
Thank the city workers are going to be out working in this, the snow removal, salt in the streets, working the utility lines when we have our interruptions there. And also congratulations to the graduates of the police department, because that is just like the military or fire or anything, it's a chosen profession that's, you choose to go into something that's very difficult, and it takes a special type of person to go into any of those. So just congratulations to them.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz, you're freed up now. I see you moving. You have anything for announcements? Yeah, she froze back.
Let me try before I freeze. I just want to send condolences to Colleen Johnson, who was buried yesterday, who has served the whole community of Topeka. I think it's a lot for her. She was a co-founder out of East Topeka, and her grand legacy with just treating everybody with love. And that's what she did. She loved everybody. Didn't matter who you were. So that says a lot that she served our whole community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kids are out of school, and watch those snow plows. Thank you.
Councilwoman Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to wish everybody a happy Lunar New Year. In many East and Southeast Asian countries, we're celebrating Lunar New Year today. With that, we know that there are 1 in 5 Asian Americans that in the time from March 2020, and it got really small there at the bottom, I know. March 2020 to September 21, 1 in 5 Asian American or Pacific Islander citizens or community members, more like, have experienced a hate incident. With the misinformation about COVID-19, this has gotten worse, and is something that we really need to make sure that we're watching out for our Asian American and Pacific Islander community members, because this is something where there's about 2/3 of these incidents happen in public spaces. Make sure that you're looking out for your brothers and sisters. Also, I wanted to wish everybody a month of deep reflection on Black history in America. In that same vein, at least 14 historically Black colleges or universities have locked down because in the past 2 days there have been bomb threats. What was said at the beginning of our meeting about there being animosity with its roots in racism is very, very true and very, very real for many people in our community. And we need to make sure that we're working towards a more equitable future, and we need to educate ourselves about each other, making sure that our information is coming from the right places and that we understand the humanity in each other. Please take this time, especially whenever it's cold, to really do that self-reflection and make sure that you're making this community a better place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Dobler.
Yeah, so just a personal note here. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala referred to me as her looking like her grandfather. I had a granddaughter born yesterday afternoon, so she must have known something. Baby's doing great. Cute little girl. I'm looking forward to holding her. With COVID regulations, only a certain amount of people can get in. It's going to be a blast. So I do not only resemble a grandfather, I am a grandfather. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Deputy Mayor Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two things. Obviously, we've all mentioned the weather. Just remind people to check in on people. If you've got neighbors who sometimes need help, or friends or family, sometimes just check in on them today and tomorrow and Thursday, whatever it is, tonight. Make sure they don't need anything. The second thing is, I'd be remiss if we didn't mention that if you saw a week or two ago after our last meeting, our crime statistics from 2021 came out, and we were down 25%, which was well above, not below, above what the national average decrease was, certainly outpaced most of the state of Kansas. And I think credit to that goes to two areas. The first is obviously our police department. Some changes have been made in different areas, which I think are making an impact. And so kudos to them for that work. But part of that also is the community, the groups that come together, the neighborhood associations, the NIAs, the NAs, the neighborhood watch groups that are also working within communities to do their part. So kudos to everybody who's, yes, we still have problems and a way to go and certain areas we need to improve in, but man, that's a pretty significant drop. So congratulations to the city for, let's keep that moving forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to note, with the mention of the graduating class tomorrow, Chief, also, I'm sure you're aware of this, just was yesterday, the retired officer Darrell Trimble passed away. Darrell, as we know him, Weeble, was one of our helicopter pilots and had a long service with the department. And my condolences out to his family and to John and everybody else. So I echo the comments about the good work that the department is doing. But Weeble was part of that generation that did it in a different way, but he did a good job. So I wanted to recognize his passing. Right now, with nothing else, there is a need for our body to go into an executive session. If I could have City Attorney read, please.
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 30 minutes to discuss matters related to an individual employee pursuant to KSA 754319B1. The open meeting will resume in the City Council chambers. The following staff may be needed to assist the governing body in its deliberations: Interim City Manager Cochran and any other staff he deems necessary.
Okay, you've heard the need for to go into executive session. Do I have a motion? Have a motion? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. I vote yes. We will adjourn and take about a quick 10-minute recess before we start our deliberations. No, you have it. Okay, we completed our discussions under executive session. No action has been taken. No further issues come to the body. I declare this meeting closed.